Bran Stark's journey in Game of Thrones represents one of the most profound explorations of consciousness in the narrative. At the beginning of the story, Bran is an ordinary child of noble birth whose worldview is shaped by innocence, family loyalty, and dreams of knighthood. His early consciousness is grounded in the typical developmental stage of a young boy who sees the world through clear moral categories and personal aspirations. However, the life-altering fall from the tower not only paralyzes his body, but also catalyzes a transformation in his perception of reality. This traumatic event acts as the first rupture in his psychological development, forcing him to confront vulnerability, loss, and the limits of physical identity. As Bran adapts to life after his injury, his awareness gradually expands beyond the conventional boundaries of human experience. The loss of his ability to walk becomes symbolically connected to the awakening of inner vision. In psychological terms, the deprivation of one's sensory capacity often heightens others, and for Bran this manifests in prophetic dreams and mystical awareness. These dreams introduce him to the possibility that consciousness is not confined to the body, but can travel, observe, and even inhabit other beings. The emergence of these experiences represents the first stage of Bran's transformation from an individual consciousness into a more expansive form of perception. Bran's ability to warg into animals is a critical moment in the development of his consciousness. Through the act of entering the mind of his direwolf Summer and later other creatures, Bran experiences reality through multiple perspectives simultaneously. This capacity suggests a dissolution of the rigid boundary between self and other, a phenomenon often explored in philosophical discussions of collective consciousness. When Bran inhabits another creature's mind, he not only controls its body, but also feels its instincts, sensations, and emotions. This blending of identities begins to reshape his sense of individuality and introduces the idea that identity can be fluid rather than fixed. The journey north of the Wall deepens Bran's psychological transformation. As he travels through harsh landscapes and witnesses the suffering of others, his consciousness becomes increasingly detached from ordinary human concerns. Survival, fear, and moral ambiguity shape his growing awareness that the world is far more complex than the noble ideals he once held in Winterfell. The physical journey mirrors an internal journey toward expanded perception. Each encounter with danger and mystery forces Bran to reconsider the nature of time, memory, and destiny. Meeting the three-eyed raven marks a turning point in Bran's evolution. Under the guidance of this ancient figure, Bran begins to understand that consciousness can extend through time as well as space. He learns that memories are not merely personal recollections, but living fragments of the past that can be observed and revisited. Psychologically, this ability challenges the linear structure through which humans typically experience time. Instead of moving from past to present to future, Bran's awareness begins to operate in a multidimensional temporal framework where all moments coexist. As Bran trains in these abilities, his sense of personal identity gradually dissolves. The accumulation of countless memories from across history begins to overwhelm the boundaries of his individual personality. He becomes less focused on his own emotions and more attuned to the vast network of experiences that define the world. This shift resembles philosophical discussions about the transformation from ego-centered awareness to a form of collective or transpersonal consciousness. Bran no longer experiences himself solely as the son of Ned Stark, but as a vessel containing the memories of humanity. The psychological burden of holding so many memories becomes evident in Bran's increasingly distant demeanor. Emotional detachment becomes both a coping mechanism and an inevitable consequence of his expanded awareness. When an individual perceives thousands of lives and events simultaneously, personal attachments may seem small in comparison to the immense flow of history. This transformation illustrates how expanded consciousness can alter emotional responses, making Bran appear cold or indifferent even though he is processing reality on a scale beyond ordinary comprehension. Another significant aspect of Bran's consciousness is his ability to influence the past. Through his visions, Bran realizes that observing history is not always a passive act. The moment when young Hodder's mind is shattered demonstrates the paradoxical relationship between perception and causation. Bran's presence in the past becomes part of the events he witnesses, suggesting that consciousness can interact with time rather than simply observe it. This revelation complicates the idea of destiny and raises philosophical questions about free will and inevitability. As Bran approaches the culmination of his transformation, he becomes less defined by personal ambition or emotional desire. Instead, his awareness aligns with the preservation of knowledge and the continuity of history. His consciousness now functions almost like a living archive that contains the memories of the world. In this role, Bran embodies the idea that consciousness can transcend individuality and become a guardian of collective experience. Ultimately, Bran Stark's evolution demonstrates how consciousness can expand beyond the limits of physical existence and personal identity. His transformation from a curious child to the three-eyed raven symbolizes the movement from ordinary awareness to a vast, interconnected perception of reality. Through Bran, Game of Thrones presents a psychological and philosophical exploration of what it means to know everything, remember everything, and exist beyond the boundaries of the self. Memory plays a central role in Bran Stark's psychological development and the formation of his expanded consciousness. In the world of Game of Thrones, memories are not simply subjective recollections stored within the brain. They are living echoes of events embedded in the fabric of time. Bran's ability to access these memories allows him to witness moments from the distant past as though he were physically present. This power redefines the nature of memory, transforming it from a personal narrative into a collective archive that shapes the identity of entire civilizations. Through Bran's visions, the past becomes a dynamic reality rather than the static record. He observes the lives of kings, warriors, and ordinary people, recognizing that each event contributes to the larger story of humanity. This awareness introduces a psychological shift in which Bran begins to understand identity not as an isolated phenomenon, but as something constructed through shared history. The memories he accesses are not his own, yet they become part of his consciousness, expanding his perception of who he is. The merging of multiple memories within Bran's mind creates a form of collective awareness. In psychological terms, this resembles the concept of the collective unconscious proposed by Carl Jung, where archetypal experiences and inherited memories influence individual behavior. Bran's consciousness becomes a literal embodiment of this idea, containing fragments of countless lives that shape his understanding of the present. The boundaries between personal memory and universal memory dissolve, creating a new form of identity rooted in shared experience. This transformation has profound implications for Bran's sense of self. As he absorbs more memories, the emotional attachments associated with his personal life begin to fade. The grief he once felt for his family, the fear he experienced during his journey, and the hopes he had as a child gradually lose their intensity. These emotions are replaced by a broader awareness of historical patterns and recurring cycles. Bran's consciousness shifts from personal narrative to historical perspective, allowing him to see events as part of a larger continuum. One of the most fascinating aspects of Bran's psychological development is the way memory alters his perception of morality. By witnessing events from multiple perspectives, he begins to understand that actions often arise from complex motivations rather than simple notions of good and evil. A king who wages war may believe he is protecting his people, while a rebel may see himself as a liberator. Through this multiplicity of viewpoints, Bran develops a form of moral awareness that transcends conventional judgment. The presence of ancient memories within Bran's mind also connects him to the mystical forces of the world. He witnesses the creation of the Night King, the origins of ancient conflicts, and the forgotten traditions of civilizations long gone. These memories reveal that history is shaped not only by human decisions, but also by deeper cosmic forces. Bran's consciousness therefore bridges the gap between human history and mythological reality, allowing him to understand the world in a way that few others can. Another consequence of Bran's expanded memory is the erosion of temporal boundaries. Past, present, and future become interconnected dimensions rather than separate stages of existence. When Bran sees events that have not yet happened, he experiences time as a continuous landscape rather than a linear path. This altered perception challenges the human tendency to think in terms of cause and effect, suggesting that all moments may coexist within a larger temporal structure. Bran's transformation also raises questions about the emotional cost of holding such immense knowledge. The accumulation of memories from countless lives could easily overwhelm a human mind. In response, Bran's personality becomes increasingly calm and detached, almost as if he has transcended ordinary emotional reactions. This detachment may appear unsettling to those around him, but it reflects the psychological adaptation required to process such an immense volume of experience. Despite this detachment, Bran's consciousness still retains a subtle connection to humanity. His understanding of history enables him to guide others and anticipate the consequences of their actions. Rather than acting as a ruler driven by personal ambition, he becomes a guardian of knowledge whose decisions are shaped by centuries of collective memory. In this sense, Bran represents a new model of leadership rooted in awareness rather than power. In the end, Bran Stark's psychological journey illustrates the transformative power of memory and consciousness. By integrating the experiences of countless lives into his own mind, he transcends the limitations of individual identity and becomes a living embodiment of history itself. His story invites viewers to reflect on the nature of awareness, the relationship between memory and identity, and the possibility that consciousness may extend far beyond the boundaries of the individual mind.